Hey everyone, I hope you're doing well. My name is Rodrigo, and for the next 30 minutes, I want to share some lessons I learned while I was working full time on open source. I'm no longer working full time on open source, now I'm a Python trainer, so I'll be telling you some stories from my past. There's a very important disclaimer that needs to be made about this talk, and I thought it was obvious, but apparently what's obvious to some isn't obvious to others. And that is that this talk is subjective. So I'm not sharing technical lessons I learned, I'm sharing lessons I learned while working on a technical project. And the things I will be sharing, those should be interpreted from the point of view of my personal experience. You might have experienced similar things, you might experience similar things in the past, or you might have completely contrary experiences, and that's fine, alright? It's my personal experience, I'm sharing it with you in the hopes that it's helpful for you folks, but it's not necessarily exactly the same. I'm betting it's not the same. And I thought this was obvious, and you're all nodding, so you agree with me, but not everyone online agreed. So I wrote this down, and someone remarked, fine, also true, but they remarked, well, this doesn't look like something specific to FOSS. Maybe I worked at a mid-sized company, and I learned the same thing. Sure, and I learned it working on FOSS. But then, okay, to address this valid remark, I renamed my talk, and now the talk is 503 days working full-time on free and open source software, lessons that I learned working on free and open source software, and that you might have learned or might still learn in some other personal or professional context. And I think I just missed something in the middle. Right, they aren't necessarily unique to FOSS, right? But it's where I learned them, so yeah, that person will have to deal with that. Sure. So the plan for today, I decided to split the several lessons I'm sharing in 4 main categories. And within those categories, there's plenty of different things I'll be sharing. And when it's time, there's 2 key highlights, I would say. And when I get to those, I will wake you up. But just for a preview of what you'll be sleeping through, we've got we've got lessons on how to get a tech job, how to manage your ego once you land the job, how to interact with users, and how to work on a code base that's so big that doesn't fit into your head. You can get a bigger head, but that's difficult, so I'll give you tips on how to work with your head and a big code base. So these are the main 4 categories of the lessons I will be sharing. And I'm going to start with how to get a tech job. Now, I'm not sharing a recipe that's going to work 100% of the time for all of you. I'm just sharing a little bit of my experience of how I got a tech job. And the key for what I'm about to say is that everything you do online acts as a banner. Everything you do online is publicity. It can be good publicity or bad publicity, but it is publicity because it's there and others may find it. So if it's there, maybe you don't have to do anything to make it work for you, but at least make sure it doesn't work against you, alright? But what happened with me was and I still am, and my wife, she doesn't always appreciate how much time I spend writing, but I still write a lot about Python and I share stuff online, and that's how I found the person that eventually hired me for 503 days. And it helped because we started interacting online sporadically, and we apparently we grew some kind of connection, because then it came a time where that person hired me. And obviously it's not going to work exactly the same for everyone. I'm not trying to sell you dreams. I'm just saying it happened with me, and I'm not completely stupid, but I'm also not the most brilliant person ever. Alright? So you keep that in mind. And one thing that I also think is important here is that you might be looking at me and thinking, yeah, well, Rodrigo, you got lucky, you know. I'm happy for you, but I did the same thing and it didn't work for me. And you are right, I did get lucky. But luck is not 100% random. There's things you can do to improve your chances of striking gold, right? If you sit at home and you do absolutely nothing, you will not get a job just like I did. If you come to PyCon, you are likely to meet someone, or you are more likely to meet someone who might be able to help you in the future, right? So there are things you can do that increase the likelihood of you being lucky. So just keep that in mind. I think it's thinking about that, I think, is useful. Acknowledging that, yes, I was very lucky, but also acknowledging that the 400 blog posts I wrote, those did not get written by chance. I wrote them, right? So there's two things to keep in mind. So with that said, I want to tell you about managing my ego. Again, it's how I managed my ego, working on a free and open source software project. And I knew going into the project that I was going to have a very interesting challenge because, okay, so let me finish my next 3 sentences before you jump to conclusions. For the first time in my life, I was not going to be the best Python developer in the room. And that was a fact. Because in previous places I worked, I was the only Python developer in the room, so I was by definition the best one. Also the worst one, but the best one, right? But now I knew for sure that I was not going to be the best one. And if I look at it in a childish way, it kind of hurts, oh, I'm no longer the best. But it's also brilliant because now I have other folks that know more than me and that can teach me, right? And it's much easier to learn from others than just having to learn everything by yourself. So if you have someone that can teach you, that's great. And if you have 3 someones that can teach you, because we were a team of 4, that's excellent. So I knew, okay, I needed to go prepared, to soak in as much knowledge as possible. And I knew there would be confrontations and arguments, not in a mad way, not people screaming at each other, just arguments like regular humans do, talking to each other, that I would lose, quote unquote, because I would not be right, which would in turn mean I would learn a lot. So I needed to be prepared for that. And if you have a big ego or if you have a fragile ego, that might require some work on your end, but it's something to take opportunity of, and you should do the best you can to harness everything you can to make the best out of that situation. And another thing that plays a big part in that is being ready to ask all the questions you can think of. There's this perception that if you ask a question about something, you're showing ignorance, or maybe you're stupid because you asked the question, or maybe you asked a silly question. But I like this. I don't remember where I read it, so I can't quote the person that said this. And even if I could, it would probably be the wrong person to quote. So I'll just say it. And that is, intelligent people ask questions because there's nothing to lose and everything to gain, right? So just ask questions. In code reviews, if you think about it, I am yet to think of other examples of this, but programmers have a very interesting job because it's not only about making sure you complete your task. So it's not only about whether the task was completed, whether you fixed the bug or whether the feature was implemented, but also how you completed the task. So the code in and of itself is important for programmers, or usually it is, right? And it's something fun to think about. When I talk to folks that are not from programming, explaining this idea is conceptually interesting. But code reviews are important, and in a code review, you will have your work scrutinized by others and hopefully constructively criticized by others. And when you get to that thing that might look like a confrontation, just drop the confrontational part of it and think, okay, if they're saying X, Y, and Z, if this doesn't look good to them, let me ask why. And not in a confrontational way, just in an honest way. Please, okay, why is this not good, so that next time I don't do it wrong. So embrace code review feedback. That's very, very important. And the embracing here really is the keyword. So I'm going to show you something funny. And when I say funny, I'm a weird person, so it's funny to me, probably not funny to you, but it's something funny. So this is just for a little bit of context. I don't think I said it. Not super relevant, but this was the project I was working on. Alright? It's a project. It exists. First week in, I think, was it the first week? I don't know. One of the first pull requests I made, commit, push, looks good. Just one request. The dreaded requests, changes requested, the dreaded symbol there, asking for a change. Pretty standard, right? Your code isn't always the best it can be on the first try. I don't get it 100% right on the first try. Probably you don't as well. If you do, come talk to me. I want to learn from you. And I thought, okay, things are going to get better, right? Hopefully, if I'm not completely stupid, like I said, hopefully I will improve. Except that things got worse. You know, a couple of pull requests later, now it's a few requests. So I'm not sure. Maybe I was getting worse. Maybe just Will was getting more comfortable, you know, criticizing my work. And I thought, okay, this is going to keep better, right? This is going to get better. But it just kept getting worse. And it's, you know, it's an honest day of work. And one day it felt like I got it right, except I didn't. And yeah, this is just some examples of things I didn't get right on the first try. But this obviously only shows you part of the picture, because these are some reviews on some of my PRs. What we're not seeing here is the times I got it right, because there were none. No, I'm just kidding, because they wouldn't make sense here. And also the other times that my colleagues didn't get it right. Those were also a thing, right? But I'm not here to shame my colleagues' work. I'm here to make fun of myself. So this was interesting. And again, coming back to these being reviews on my code, and the things that you're not seeing here but that were also true, is that everyone makes mistakes. And this is a super, apologies for the word, it's a super lame quote, but also super true. This is so true, because I made so many weird, stupid mistakes, and they were fine with it, because what you cannot do, absolutely don't do it, is don't make the same mistake twice. That's not allowed. But making an honest mistake, that's fine. Assuming you're not working with jerks. So if you're not working with jerks, making an honest mistake is fine. Just do everything you can to make sure you don't do it twice, because that's not very reasonable. And if you're into self-deprecating humor, I've got a teaser of the lowest point in my career where, and I'm so ashamed I didn't even show you the context of my issue. So this was, it's not visible, this was the silliest issue I ever created. And stripping it down of like the fluff around the project, what I said essentially was, I hope you're sitting for this. Please, you need to sit down, because this is mind-blowing. What I said was, I ran Python, and the issue was Python ran. Do you understand what I'm saying? I was complaining that when I ran Python, Python ran. That's supposed to happen. And that's essentially what I said. I ran Python and Python ran. This is wrong, because I was flagging a bug. Okay, and then Dave said, Rodrigo, are you sure that's a bug? Just sit down, think about it. Is that a bug? And then, yeah, I closed this issue in shame and I retired. So, yeah, that's why I teach now. I'm making a bad joke, sorry. Alright, so then with that said, let's talk a little bit about the biggest the biggest blessing of projects, which are the users. And I made this admittedly bad play because users are a blessing. You're usually not pouring your heart and soul into a project if then you get no users. Or if you pour your heart and soul into a project, you hope to get users. Not necessarily millions, but one enthusiastic person that enjoys your project. But they're also a curse, in the sense that interacting with users was surprisingly time-consuming and surprisingly difficult. At least for me, it was surprising. So I want to tell you a little bit about that. And if you fell asleep, like I said in the beginning, now comes one of the key moments of this talk, and that is, you should create a contributing guide. This is maybe the key moment. So the second one that comes later is not as good as this one. So this is the key takeaway from this talk. You can take a picture, you can jot it down. It's 1, 2, 3, 4 words. Create a contributing guide. And the reason you're going to create it is not because people will read it, because they will not. It's just that it's going to be this document that is going to have your back on a number of occasions. So it's good that it's there. So create it. And like I said, no one will read it. But it's fine, because it's going to be helpful either way. So you have this project, people are installing it, people are using it, and then they find a bug with your project. Hopefully a better bug than the one I just found. They find an actual bug. And one of the best things you can do, I'm getting ahead of myself, because maybe you've heard of MREs, the minimum reproducible examples, and I think we can all agree that in an utopian world, everyone that's submitting a bug knows about these things, and they take the time to actually get an MRE, and they write a thoughtful, comprehensible bug report. That's not going to be the case, and it's not necessarily because your users don't care. It's just because people are weird. Everyone's different. Some don't think of it, some don't know about it, some don't have the time, some think that's useless, some don't understand the importance. And so one thing you can do is to give very clear instructions to bug reporters. And if you're specifically working with GitHub, there's this thing called issue templates. They're markdown documents you write, and when someone clicks new issue, they get presented with different templates they can fill in. Sorry about that. They're presented with different templates they can fill in. And you will want to have a bug report template. And that template should contain the instructions of everything that the user should do when reporting a bug. And one of the things you will do is refer to the contributing guide, because your contributing guide should have everything outlined. It should explain what an MRE is, what type of information your project typically needs. For example, Textual is something that runs in your command line interface, and it does all sorts of funky things. I didn't really talk about it, but these three things you're seeing, this spreadsheet thingy, this calculator, this pseudo code editor, at least a code viewer, these are all running inside the terminal. So these are not, web pages or whatever. This is inside the terminal. And this is doing funky business with the terminal. And one thing, when you're reporting bugs for this project, one thing that's typically useful is terminal information, like the terminal name, the version, stuff like that. And so in our issue templates, where was it? Yeah. When we are giving clear instructions to bug reporters, we say, please specify the terminal you're using, its version, etc., because that's useful to us. But users don't necessarily know that beforehand, and it's not their fault. They don't have to guess. So I think this is a very important thing. And like I said, everything should be written down in a contributing guide. And another thing, and I know this is, controversial. Not too controversial, but I know people who disagree with me on this. I think it's useful if you're so kind in your interactions that it's almost annoying, to the point that it's ridiculous. Because I personally struggle a lot with conveying emotions through text. And I find myself often, and I still need to figure this out, I find myself often writing something, and I'm feeling joyful or playful, or I'm in a good mood, and I send it, and 5 minutes later I think about what I wrote, and I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, that may not sound so good if people are not in a receptive mood, because it's hard to figure out emotion from text alone. That's why sometimes I put emoji in there. And even when I do that, sometimes it looks passive-aggressive. So it's difficult to nail that. And so just try to be kind, because if someone sounds rude or harsh, maybe English is not their first language and they have a hard time expressing themselves. Maybe. And it's very common. Right? I have this issue. One time, this contributor opened a pull request, and I closed the pull request and I insulted the contributor. And the only reason I did that was because I made a mistake, because there's two words, one in Portuguese and one in English, that sound almost the same, and I thought, yeah, they mean the same, and they did not. Alright? So thankfully then the guy that kept blocking my work, saying one request, multiple, he said, Rodrigo, just, are you sure that's what you want to say? Are you sure that's the word you're looking for? And then I looked it up on the dictionary and I was like, nope. I'm really sorry. That's not what I meant. Yeah, so maybe that happens with what did I do? Oh no, sorry, because I have text there and different text there and I was confused. Yeah, so be so kind, it's annoying. Alright? Now, another thing I think is helpful, useful, important is to give the first reply very quickly. Someone opens an issue, you reply quickly. Someone opens a pull request, you reply quickly. And I'm not saying if someone opens a bug, what do you call it? When you a bug something. Report. Thank you, Diego. When someone opens a bug report, are you all sleeping like I said you could? When you open a bug report, I'm not saying you should fix it right away. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying reply quickly. Hey, thank you so much for your bug report. I'll take a look at this ASAP. Or as soon as possible, because not everyone knows acronyms. And if there's something clearly missing from the bug report, here's the contributing guide. I told you to write it. The person that just opened the bug report didn't read it, but now you can link to it, and you just saved yourself a bunch of time. If someone opens a pull request, hey, thank you so much for opening this pull request. I'll review it as soon as possible. Because the first interaction, I think, is very important. Because if you say, hey, thank you, I'm busy now, that's fair, that's reasonable. If someone opens a pull request and then they go for months without hearing anything back, it just feels like their work fell into the void. And maybe you even saw it and you thought, oh wow, this looks really good, I need to find time to work on this. And then you didn't, because fine, life, that's fair. But then the person doesn't even know that their work was acknowledged, and it can kind of hurt. Or if it's someone's first time, or one of the first times someone is contributing to open source and they hear about it and it's amazing, it's this wonderful place where people volunteer their time to do stuff for free for others, which in and of itself is insane. If you think people who are not programmers, they do not understand this, because when you go to the supermarket, you can't smile at the register and leave with the stuff you wanted to. You have to pay, but you just peep install. You don't even have to smile, right? So think about it, because programmers, for us, this is kind of, we take this for granted, but other folks, they don't understand this concept. What's free stuff? All right. So reply quickly, because you don't want to discourage others and you want to be so kind it's annoying, if you remember what I said. So first reply, very quick. If you're insanely busy, write an automatic action that thanks the person. It's better than nothing. All right? Something is better than nothing. So I think this is maybe I'll promote this to a key takeaway, the be so kind it's annoying. Yeah, so do that. And like I said, if there's something obviously missing, just point to the contributing guide and then they can take their time to fix it. Because if someone is spending their time to contribute to your project, hopefully they are invested in it and they are well-intentioned. So there's a high likelihood that if you give them something with clear instructions, they will abide by those rules and they will follow your instructions. So it's a win-win for everyone. And now comes my favorite part of this talk, which is talking about how to handle external pull requests. And I say it's my favorite part of the talk. See, I'm conveying emotion. This is my favorite part of the talk because for me this was something very difficult. And it has to do with my nature. I told you it's a subjective talk. I'm not very confrontational, or I prefer to be pleasing, or I prefer to agree with others in general. And so having to review someone's work, and not my co-workers, someone I never met, I don't know who they are, and I'm just saying, yeah, your code isn't, can you change this? For me, it felt like a good challenge. So this was interesting for me. So what did I gather from this? I gather that if I'm looking at someone's code and I don't, and this happened, I swear this happened way too often. There's this huge project, there's hundreds of files, there's hundreds of functions and methods. Everything has a docstring. How do I know it's everything? Because I'm a psychopath and I looked at everything and I added docstrings to the little things that didn't have. So everything has a docstring. And someone makes a pull request and they added one function and their function does not have a docstring, and the functions above and below have docstrings. Why do you think your function is special? Right? And I have to tell them, or I do it myself, can you please add a docstring? Or, I don't know, in these projects, we only use 5-letter variable names because those are the best variable names, the ones with 5 letters. But if I say this to someone, they might think I'm, I don't know, crazy or just picking on their work. So what I do is, I tell them to read the contributing guide, because the contributing guide will have your style guidelines. And if it's there, it no longer feels like it's me attacking you for your work. It's me just saying, there's this thing, I wrote it. There's this thing that tells you should do X, Y, Z. And so it no longer, because remember, humans are animals, rational ones usually, most of the time, but animals. And so these things might feel like personal attacks. But if it's a document, the contributing guide, that's telling you variable names have 5 letters and 5 letters only, then it's much easier for the other person to accept it and to comply. So the contributing guide really has your back. And like this silly situation, obviously we have variable names that are shorter than 5 letters and longer than 5 letters. But all sorts of things with the typing or no typing and the variable names and the docstrings and the docstring formats and everything. Contributing guide. So I kept linking people to the contributing guide. And then finally, one note on closing pull requests, because sometimes you have to do it, and I don't mean merge them, I mean close them. One thing I find useful, not useful, one thing I try to do, it's not always possible, but one thing I try to do is, if I have to close a PR, I look for something I can salvage, and I make a second PR with that thing and add the original person as a co-author to that commit. And the reason I do this is because if it's someone I don't know, again, maybe it's their first time contributing to open source, maybe it's their second time, maybe it's their third time, and for them it's important to see that their work had an impact, and a positive impact. And it's not just, and I think this is very important, maybe superfluous for some, but I think it's important. Add them as a co-author, because otherwise it might just look like you're stealing, right? Because you're just copying and pasting and then, yeah, it's done. No, just take whatever you can, salvage it, and then make sure the other person gets some attribution that they can point others to. Look, I helped with this. This is my face. This is my GitHub handle. I find this important for others. Now, there's no time for story time, and I've been telling stories either way, so it's fine. And so let's end on a couple of things I learned working on a big code base that does not fit into my head, because I cannot get a bigger head, and the code base wasn't getting shorter, smaller, so I needed to be able to handle it. And therefore, when I was working on an issue, I had to keep things in mind at all times. Again, because I don't know how the whole thing works completely, entirely. I don't know that because I cannot keep it here. So I try to keep four smaller things in my head to which I could refer when thinking about the project and thinking about the changes I was making. And the first one is that when I'm working on something, I need to think about what's going to be best for the person using what I'm doing. It's not what's best for me. I'm thankfully getting paid to work on this, so what's best for the folks using this? So I need to keep that in mind when changing something, when adding a feature. And another one which I managed to screw up all the time was, what's the spirit of the issue I'm fixing? It's not what's in the letter of the issue, it's what's the spirit. Because this is a question, you have some input, just to help you understand what I mean. There's some input and some output, and now you want to write a function that converts the input to the output. And what I would do sometimes is this. Because this follows the letter of the question, right? It does turn the input into the output. But we can also look at that and think, okay, that's probably not what they meant, right? So I kept getting this wrong. So always think about what's the point of the issue. And then another thing that I hated, but was also absolutely true, I take the heat, I do the boring things, I do the difficult things so that it's easier for the dev using my project. Well, not but the one I was working on, right? And I hated it because it meant more work for me, but that's the point, so that others have an easier time doing whatever they want with the project you're working on. And finally, when making design decisions, when deciding to do an API in a certain way or to structure things in this or that way, am I, by choosing to do things like this, am I preventing something reasonable from happening in the future? Is there any universe in which I might want to do something else that's prevented by my decision here? And I just realized I have 2 seconds left. So I'm going to show you my pull request list. I'm going to skip all of the jokes. I'm just going to show you this pull request checklist. I think this is helpful. This was the second key moment, so just take a picture. And one thing that's very helpful is when you make a pull request, make it a draft pull request and review your own pull request first. Super helpful. No one told me that, but it feels like everyone should know this. So that's very, very helpful. I found it very helpful. So these are the lessons I learned. Your online presence is publicity. Good or bad, it's up to you. You have to be open to learning. You should be so kind it's annoying, and definitely add a contributing guide. And please run the tests. That's what was in the diagram. All arrows went to run the tests, so that's important. Run the tests. I broke them in all ways imaginable. It was insane. And to conclude, I want to thank you for your time and ask you to scan this QR code, because it's going to give me the power to control your phone, and it will open a short Google Forms where you can tell me whether you were asleep or not, because that's helpful in understanding how the talk went. Thank you so much for your time.